Hi, and welcome once again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is February 7th, and today we're going to have a very delicious article.
Yeah, I'm a fan of our food today. We're talking about the science behind popcorn, although I think the Chinese is really direct here. It's like, why does popcorn pop? Like, I like that. It's very
Explode,
direct.
yeah.
Explode, boom.
Yeah, I guess I am fond of popcorn, but I probably haven't eaten it for like 10 years.
It's really odd that you say that because I went for a very long time without eating popcorn too. Even when I went to the movies, I'm like, I don't want to pay for this. Even in Taiwan, where prices are cheap at the movie theater, I'm just going to say it, they're cheap. I just never had it. And then like last winter, I was like, I haven't had popcorn in a long time. And I ate a bag. And it was like rediscovering like childhood magic or something. And I was like, wow, this is really good.
Yeah, that's right.
Wife was like, why are you eating this? Like, because I was winter, I was fine with carrying a little weight. I wasn't trying to be slim for the beach or anything. Man, I ate some bags of popcorn last year. I ate a lot of popcorn last year.
I have a lot of happy memories of making popcorn with my mother and my sister at home. And so we would use a very thick cast iron pan to make it.
Great.
Heat it up, put the butter in. No, it was oil.
Oil.
You put oil in to pop it, keep it covered. There's always a few burnt ones and some that aren't popped. In the end, my mouth is watering. Okay, then you drizzle butter over the top. Now that kind of popcorn and some salt. I can accept, but I think it was on this program that we read an article about what kind of popcorn they use at movie theaters. Number one is stale. It's not fresh. And number two, they use a butter-flavored oil.
It's such even the way they describe it is gross. Please go ahead, tell us.
Paint
the
is
picture.
Full of all kinds of additives. It's not natural butter at all. And so that kind of covers up the staleness of the popcorn. And it fills the room with smells, so people want to go to the concession stand and buy popcorn and food, which is overpriced, and then Coke, and I don't drink soda at all. So that's one reason I would just never, ever, ever eat popcorn in a movie theater.
I think they call it butter flavoring. They don't even try to give it a nicer name. It's like, would you like extra butter flavored topping? You're like, oh, no.
They're not allowed to by law.
It's not butter. It's not butter. It's
butter.
A flavoring. But it's just like, you can't think of a better word than this. It's just very unappetizing sounding English.
And it's not fresh. And that for me is a deal breaker because as you get older, you're not so interested in all kinds of complicated, fancy dishes with all of these weird sauces, which is stuff I found interesting when I was younger. You just want food that's fresh, and at most you put a little salt on it. And that's about it.
Your description of I called that campfire popcorn because we would always make it that way at camp where you have just a cast iron skillet, you throw the corn in there, cover it with oil. That's such a satisfying treat. That is a satisfying treat. That really is.
But when I think back on it, the part that makes me feel so good is the connection with my sister and my mother.
It's one of those foods that's just as fun to make as it is to eat. Like there's a lot of food, like you just open it and eat it thoughtlessly. But there's a bit of a process to making homemade popcorn, and it is very satisfying. I am with you with this.
And you've got that steam coming out of the pan when you open the cover.
Anticipation built in.
And it tastes so good. Oh, my mouth is watering again. Let's get to our article. So that is the experience of real popcorn, and I'm all for that. But personally, I would never buy popcorn at a movie theater. I also do not buy it in bags when they've already added syrups, kinds of flavorings. I would stay away from that. Make your own if you have to make it. And absolutely do not use a microwave. Don't use those ready-made popcorn pans.
The Jiffy Pop, right?
That's what it's called. Never, ever use it. Those are really bad for you. All right, let's go back to our article. The science behind popcorn. It's a natural treat loved by people around the world. For a lot of moviegoers, a night out at the cinema wouldn't be the same without it. Many adults and kids also delight in making it at home to snack on. After all, it's hard not to love a food that explodes. But why exactly does popcorn blow up and turn into something delicious?
In fact, the science behind popcorn is fairly simple. With popcorn, there are three main factors at work. Firstly, the kernel or seed of popcorn contains a small amount of water along with a large amount of starch. Secondly, the outer shell of the kernel, which is called the hull, is strong and traps water inside it. Thirdly, when heated enough, the water expands into steam. This steam makes the starch softer. It also produces pressure inside the kernel. Since the steam cannot escape from the hull, it eventually explodes. When that happens, the kernel basically turns inside out.
Does all corn act this way? No. The corn that people commonly eat is a variety known as sweet corn. No matter how long someone leaves sweet corn on a barbecue or in an oven, it won't burst into little puffs. The popcorn people eat comes from a variety of corn that is itself called popcorn. Another interesting fact about popcorn is related to the reason that it makes a bang when it pops. It was once thought that the sound came from the kernel breaking. However, scientists discovered it is actually due to the sudden release of water vapor from the kernel. In other words, this swift change in air pressure produces the popping sound. And that is the end of our piece. Let's go back to the beginning. So our title again, The Science Behind Popcorn. Chris and I were just kind of sharing memories of camp and of making and eating popcorn at home. That was the experience of making and eating it. But now we're going to learn about the science behind it. We want to know why popcorn explodes.
And we have one of these kind of classic paragraphs that we introduced with a long tail. We're not telling you what we're talking about. And oftentimes we have several articles like this a month, but generally you'll hear the topic sentence within 2 or 3 sentences. This whole first paragraph is like, what is it? Tell me what it is. I need to know. And this is an interesting writing technique. You can kind of see, where do they first talk about our actual topic in the sentence? And we're going to go several sentences before we even get there.
The only problem with that is that they've already given away the answer in the title. So if you skip the title, then it works. But it's still kind of...
Which is a bad idea, right? Don't skip the title.
Well, anyway, it works up a little bit of suspense, and that is a good writing technique, as Chris mentioned. So again, it's a natural treat loved by people around the world.
What is it?
Yeah, what is it? Natural appeals to me because so many snacks are manufactured. They're full of additives and stuff that's not good for you. But this one is natural if you make it the right way. And it started in the U.S., but it's popular now all over the world. And they often borrow the English word for it. Like, for example, in French, they use the English word for it. For a lot of moviegoers, a night out at the cinema wouldn't be the same without it. And cinema definitely means a movie theater, but we generally don't say it in the U.S. If you say, I'm going to the cinema tonight,
You feel a little fancy. In fact,
fancy.
Speaking of borrowing, the French borrowing words, cinema is directly from French. So there you go.
And the Brits use it. So it's a really common word in British English, but we hardly use it in American English. And if you try to use British vocabulary, or even worse, a British accent, people are going to kind of look at you like, what's wrong with you? Like you're trying to show off and you're not doing a good job of it anyway. Okay, actually, I did that once when I was little and my father said, stop talking in such an affected way. Okay, so if you go to the movies, a lot of people just assume, of course, you're getting popcorn and probably soda. Many adults and kids also delight in making it at home to snack on. And that's what kind of called up all kinds of memories for me and then again for Chris, because that's the way we remember it. I think that young people now, they generally remember Jiffy Pop if they make it at home, but we made it really from scratch, and it's not that hard to make.
I was a huge fan of Jiffy Pop as a kid, and I agree it's kind of gross today, but we were poor, and so Jiffy Pop was the more expensive variety of popcorn, and so
really?
we often handmade it. If we had Jiffy Pop like once, and I thought it was like the greatest thing on earth. Like, wow, it's just like a pan you smash on there and it pops by itself. This is the greatest invention of all time. But Jiffy Pop, like old school, it's been around a long time.
Since I was a kid.
Right.
And that was a long time ago. But they did a really good job of marketing it.
Yeah.
And on making it look really fancy in the TV commercials, because here they have you shake, shake, shake over the burner. We didn't use a microwave back then. Microwaves weren't yet popular. But you're doing this slow little shake, shake, shake over the burner. It's got a wonderful sound to it. And then it slowly expands into a great big aluminum foil bubble. And then they cut it into a star at the top. And that looks so beautiful. You're peeling back
it open, yes.
The points of the star. They really did a great job of marketing in that commercial.
Hear, hear.
But we still did not get Jiffy Pop. We made it ourselves, thank goodness.
Did you make a popcorn garland at any point?
Yes, we did.
That's something that I feel has disappeared. A popcorn garland was a thing even when I was a kid, but we only did it a few times. You'd often hear it referenced. Garland is the stuff you hang like Christmas time, Christmas lights, and today you buy kind of like plastic garland, and it's very colorful and shiny, and you could get it really cheap at many stationery stores in Taiwan. But popcorn was like the thing you would hang around your house, obviously unsalted and unbuttered.
Exactly. I was going to add that. You just take a needle and thread, and you just thread the popcorn onto the needle and thread. And then when you've run out of thread, you just tie a knot at the end and you can hang it up. You can put these on a Christmas tree. You often put them on the Christmas tree. And you can also use them as leis. You can hang them around your neck if you make it into a circle. Another thing we would do with popcorn is mix it with some sugar that's cooked into syrup and make popcorn balls.
Right.
So all of those, it's really a big part of our culture that came to us from the Native Americans. So adults and kids alike, they delight in. It means it makes us really happy to snack on it at home.
And we still don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, although we've given it away many times. After all, it's hard not to love a food that explodes.
I need to know what this magic food is.
But by the time you say it explodes, now we probably have a good inkling of what's coming. But why exactly does popcorn blow up and turn into something delicious?
Finally.
Great reveal. The great reveal. We finally know what food we're talking about, assuming we ignore the title.
And then everything else we've said since then.
That's right.
All right, let's go to our next sentence. In fact, the science behind popcorn is fairly simple.
This is a very straightforward sentence. So if you're wondering what in the world makes this food explode, we're telling you that there is a science to it, but it is not hard to understand.
With popcorn, there are three main factors at work.
And that is the perfect number for writing. For anything you're writing, if you have to create a list of something, try to make it a list of 3 because it has a natural balance like a tripod. It won't fall over. If it's just 2, it'll fall over. If it's just 1, it's not a list. But the minute you go over 3, you start forgetting. We can remember 3 items much better, and they have this wonderful balance that we love when we're writing and reading.
Let's continue. Firstly, the kernel or seed of popcorn contains a small amount of water along with a large amount of starch.
Now, first of all, the word kernel is pronounced the same as a rank in the military, which is spelled C-O-L-O-N-E-L. C-O-L-O-N-E-L, colonel. That is a rank in the military, and it does not look at all like this word, and there's no R in it, but it is also pronounced colonel in American English. It's different in British English. So the kernel, this is what we call the little seed of popcorn, and since it's very hard, we don't normally see inside to find out what is inside. And we now know what it is. We have some water in there, not very much, and then a lot of starch because corn is actually very starchy.
We need to spend a moment on this word kernel. Of course, just like Karen said, this is the little seed of popcorn. It's very hard on the outside. But kernel is actually a very old word for corn itself. Now, corn is native to the Americas, North America and South America, Mexico specifically. So what's weird here is that the British used the word corn before they ever saw what we call corn today. How is this possible? That's because long ago in the past, British English just said corn for any type of grain. Any kind of grain you would eat, it was just corn, corn, corn. So when they arrive in North America and Native Americans teach them how to plant corn, they're like, well, what's this food? Like, it's just a grain. Call it corn. It's just grain, 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 anything you see.
So how do we distinguish it from other grains? Well, you add Indian. So we called it Indian corn back then.
That's right. That was the corn that Native Americans taught the Europeans to plant. There are actually a total of 6 major varieties of corn, but the one that Europeans learned to plant first from Native Americans was this really beautiful, colorful purple and red and blue corn. It's so lovely to look at, but it is rather hard. And so it doesn't expire. So even though it wasn't so easy to eat, it's honestly quite challenging to chew, it would last all winter. So it was a very good food to last you well into the cold months when nothing would grow.
They would often grind it up into corn flour
right.
to make mush. Yeah, you have to cook it quite a long time. There are a lot of other corn dishes. But then in British English, they don't say corn so much now unless they're influenced by American, which they are sometimes. They call it maize, M-A-I-Z-E. M-A-I-Z-E, and that is from Spanish. And the word for corn in Spanish is maíz. So it came from Spanish.
Please be careful of Indian corn. Today, that word is a little bit passé. It's a word that's kind of fallen out of fashion. It's currently encouraged to be called flint corn. But the reason it was called Indian corn, it's because this was the grain that the Native Americans or Indians taught us, and the Spanish originally thought they were in India or the West Indies. So that makes sense.
And how popular is the term flint corn? Well, I can tell you I learned it just 15 minutes ago.
To be fair, I learned it about an hour ago, too.
Okay. So apparently it is not really that popular yet. People are just trying to get rid of words that we think are politically incorrect.
Right.
Calling Native Americans Indians is one example.
Let's continue on. Secondly, the outer shell of the kernel, which is called the hull, is strong and traps water inside it.
Hull has another meaning, like with ships, right?
That's right. It's the outside of the boat, and it keeps the water out. This hull keeps the water in.
Okay. All right. So the outer shell of the kernel, that part that was so hard that we were talking about, it is very strong, so the water stays inside. It doesn't evaporate quickly.
Our next sentence begins, thirdly, when heated enough, the water expands into steam.
And I remember seeing a cartoon animation of this process. You can see like these little drops of water. They're getting really active and moving around as they're being heated and then turning into steam, and boom, they explode.
Let's continue. This steam makes the starch softer.
So the kernel starts out very hard, and inside you've got the starch. But once it is blown out, it is sort of thinned out. It is now full of air. And in that way, it becomes much softer.
Okay, let's continue to our next sentence. It also produces pressure inside the kernel.
We've kind of jumped ahead on that. So as you're heating it, the water starts to boil, it turns to steam, and then we're getting a lot of pressure because the water is now steam, and that's taking up more space.
Since the steam cannot escape from the hull, it eventually explodes. Pop!
We've described that a number of times now. Eventually means at some point. Slowly, the time is going to come, boom.
When that happens, the kernel basically turns inside out.
I think that's really cute.
I think so, too. I think that's a really interesting way to explain it, too, because it just flips on itself. The outside becomes the inside.
That's right. And it reminds me of a famous movie. It's called Inside Out.
Oh, okay. Right.
It's from Disney.
Yes,
from
Pixar.
It's a Pixar movie.
Right.
I highly recommend it because I'm somebody who almost never goes to the movies. I actually went to a theater to see that movie. And it's not just because the main character is from Minnesota. That's not the only reason. It's really, really a good, thoughtful movie. It will really make you think about how your brain works. All right, so our last paragraph. Does all corn act this way? So can you just buy any old corn, dry it out, and think that you can use it to make popcorn? The answer is in the next sentence. No. The corn that people commonly eat is a variety known as sweet corn. And there is a huge difference. So like Chris was describing earlier, so-called Indian corn or flint corn is very, very starchy and it gets very hard. But people have actually done a lot of hybridizing of corn. They have developed it so that it keeps certain qualities and gets rid of other qualities. And they increase the amount of sugar in the corn kernels. And sweet corn now is really, really sweet. You can eat it raw. It's like eating fruit.
So it's funny that you mentioned this, that corn has been changed over time. And in fact, it's been changed so much that let's say humans went extinct tomorrow. One of the next things to go extinct would be corn. We've changed corn so much away from its original grass, which was what it was, into a plant that cannot fall off its own kernel, off its own cob itself. It cannot plant itself. It cannot reproduce by itself. Corn is now entirely dependent upon humans to dig a hole, pull it off the cob, and stick it in the ground. We go, then corn goes next.
Oh, so they better take that seriously and be nice to us.
Corn better make sure.
I didn't know that. No matter how long someone leaves sweet corn on a barbecue or in an oven, it won't burst into little puffs.
That sounds delicious.
It does. The popcorn people eat comes from a variety of corn that is itself called popcorn. So that way you won't make a mistake. If you're going to buy corn to make popcorn, buy the variety that is labeled popcorn. Another interesting fact about popcorn is related to the reason that it makes a bang when it pops. So another thing that is interesting to know about popcorn has to do with that big bang it makes when it's time it comes and it pops open. It was once thought that the sound came from the kernel breaking. However, scientists discovered that it is actually due to the sudden release of water vapor from the kernel.
I did not know this personally. It makes sense. Kind of this sudden explosion isn't the kernel making a sound, but rather its reaction in the air. It's almost like a sonic boom in many ways.
Yeah, of this hot steam that was under pressure. In other words, this swift change in air pressure produces the popping sound, and that is a good thing to know. So, my mouth is still watering. I think we still have some questions to finish, though, before I can run and get some popcorn. Number 1, what is the second paragraph mainly about?
A, how and where popcorn is grown.
Has it told us where popcorn is grown?
I mean, we talked about it, but it is not in the article.
No, so A is not the right answer. B, why popcorn bursts open when heated.
There's your answer.
That's it. We've been talking about that a lot. C,
the history behind a popular snack food.
Now, we know that these are both going to be wrong answers because the answer is B. And D, why popcorn is so popular around the world. They kind of suggest it indirectly because it kind of makes our mouth water reading about it.
Number 2, according to the passage, which part of the kernel prevents steam from flowing out?
You have a little picture here, and you've got different parts of the kernel labeled A, B, C, and D, pointing to different parts of the kernel. We need to look for the part of the kernel on the outside, and that is called the
hull.
That's right, so the answer is letter D. Number 3, 4 students are in a group discussion. Which of the following statements is correct?
A, in addition to popcorn, sweet corn can also pop.
We have just discredited that idea. No, the answer is no, so it's the wrong answer. B, the corn kernel is mainly composed of the seed, starch, and flakes. That's a really flaky answer. No.
C, many people enjoy eating popcorn while watching movies.
And that's true. That's something of a cliche. Everybody knows that. So that's the correct answer. D, sweet corn also makes a popping sound when fried in hot oil. No, not generally. Okay. That is our last question, and Chris had a story for us.
Well, it ties into our last question here. Many people enjoy eating popcorn while watching movies. And the question being begged here is why? And the answer is you have to dig back in a little bit of history. Now, number 1, like we talked earlier, that corn is mainly grown in the United States, and movies initially came out of the United States as well. And so you have a little bit of a confluence. You have a little bit of a tying together of different technologies and the way the United States was built that kind of led us into popcorn being a popular snack. Now, initially, movie theaters were the only places you can learn about the news or that you could
watch cartoons.
Watch cartoons, yeah, that's true, without having a radio, which initially was rather quite expensive. And so movie theaters were wonderful places to escape. But movie theaters were more oftenly called cinemas that we discussed earlier because they were a little fancy. But people don't talk about those today. Initially, movie theaters were fancy places, and you didn't want the rabble causing a lot of trouble. However,
sort of like dressing up to go to the opera.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
People dressed up, and they were expected to be nice, but the theaters that would have a popcorn seller outside would actually make more money than movie theaters that refuse to let people eat inside.
Business opportunity.
That's right. So these theaters that were letting people snack on popcorn outside were making more money, and so movie theaters were eventually won over. But again, this begs a question. Why were there popcorn people outside in the first place? Well, the United States went through something of a corn boom during the Great Depression. There was so much corn being made that chocolate was basically priced out of the market. Mm-hmm. It was too expensive. People couldn't afford it, but corn was really cheap. And as we discussed earlier, it tastes really good by itself. So with plummeting prices, chocolate being out of the market, movie theaters being the first big thing that people could do on the cheap, popcorn became a sudden hit snack. And then during World War II, right after the Great Depression, soldiers were shipped this cheap corn. They got addicted to it, and history was written.
And I'm still wiping the saliva off my mouth. Let's wrap this up. Okay, so I hope that's given you some new insights into popcorn and maybe has made you hungry. Tune in next time. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.